That boy has been officially fired from Hyak Motorsports, and 2311 Racing and Forward Motorsports have asked the full appeals panel to hear the preliminary injunction case. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them straight really quickly. We're going to start by talking about the Cup race in Pocono. As it was announced on Saturday evening that the NASCAR Cup Series race at Pocono, the Great American Getaway 400 had officially sold out. This is now the third consecutive year in a row that the race has been officially sold out in the grandstands and camping as well. This is a really big deal. Obviously, I think it was a great decision to go out and only have one race at the racetrack, as when you only have one day, it's your one chance and opportunity to get out to a racetrack. So I think that's some really exciting and really great news, and pretty awesome once again to see that the Cup race at Pocono has officially sold out once again. And I think that continues into 2026, as to say what you want to say about the racing product. When you have one day, it's a really good thing for the city. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Corey Heim. As reported by the NASCAR Insights account on Friday, that Corey Heim has officially surpassed 2,250 laps led in NASCAR Truck Series competition. He is now 10th all-time in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. In fact, so far this year, Corey Heim has already led over 850 laps in Truck Series competition and is on track to lead 1,000 laps for the first time in his career in a single season. Corey Heim has been the dominant guy so far in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series this year, and I think that is going to continue as the season progresses and goes on. I think he probably should honestly have more than 3 or 4 wins this year with how dominant he's been, and I think he's still going to win a lot more races by the end of the year. He's one of the favorites going into Lime Rock this weekend, and I think that him having 10th all-time is impressive. I think there's a chance if trucks continues on, he might break the record at this break if he continues racing in trucks, but nonetheless, pretty impressive to see that he continues leading more laps in truck competition and dominating the series. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Denny, Hamlin, William Byron, and Kyle Larson. Now, this weekend and on Friday, all 3 of these individuals were at the Fanatic Games for the WWE. This was the Fanatic Fest that was taking place. A lot of big celebrities were at this big event. I think earlier today, the Sidemen and Logan Paul were at the event today on Sunday. Also, some big-name individuals. I believe LeBron was at it. I believe Kevin Durant showed up, I believe, on Friday, I'm pretty sure. But it's a pretty big deal for Denny Hamlin, William Byron, and Kyle Larson. A lot of these people who are associated with some people that are involved with the WWE. I think it's really big that they got the chance to go out here because, of course, they were at Pocono this weekend, which, of course, this took place in New York. I think an event like this is really, really huge, and having a WWE, which, of course, has major ties and association with NASCAR sometimes. It seems like they're very closely related in some ways, shapes, or forms. I think it was pretty cool to see them out there. Pretty exciting to see that they were able to show up to the event. Pretty cool stuff, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the IndyCar race from Road America. So before the NASCAR Cup Series race took place at Pocono Raceway, you had the IndyCar race at Road America. And this race is really wild and really chaotic. A lot of the guys up front, that qualified up front, Louis Foster, who started on the pole, would not be the guys going for the victory. As the race continued on, there were a lot of big incidents. Stingray Robb had a pretty big crash. Christian Lundgaard, one of the strongest cars, spun out in the middle portion of the race. And other drivers like Joseph Newgarden, who's had a terrible season so far, got into an incident and crashed. But the guy who would emerge as the favorite going in was Alex Palou. Alex Palou has been the dominant guy so far, but the last 2 races for Alex Palou have not gone as strong, and they've closed the gap into under 75 points at this moment. But today, Alex Palou put up a dominating run at the end of the event. Didn't make any mistakes on the track, was aggressive at times, but had a great run, and Alex Palou put together a great performance and would come off the final corner and pick up a 6th IndyCar victory of 2025, and his standings points lead back up to now 93 points over Pato O'Ward or Kyle Kirkwood in the championship. Alex Palou is the favorite to win the championship. There's only 8 races left to go, and with Mid-Ohio coming up, he was really good there last year. He's not as good on the ovals, but he was really good at Iowa last year. So I think if he can get through Iowa and run really good at Mid-Ohio, I think he's easily going to clinch championship. It's been impressive to see what Alex Palou has been doing in IndyCar so far this year. It's been really fun to watch, and I think this is not going to be the last time you're going to see Alex Palou winning races and going to victory lane. So congratulations to him on picking up the win in IndyCar at Road America. It was a well-deserved, a well-earned win, and a well-earned victory. Good to see him get it done, and good to see him go out there and get it done and pick up the victory. Congratulations to him on winning the IndyCar race at Road America. It will not be the last time he wins, as I think he's going to win a lot more races going forward, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about IndyCar once again. As it was officially announced and confirmed by IndyCar earlier this weekend, the IndyCar will officially debut their new chassis in 2028 and have officially confirmed that it will be, in fact, in 2028. According to some things that Nathan Brown had noted earlier today, there will be 85 to 100 pounds reduction on the car, basically the added weight from the hybrids that were added. They're going to be taking all that weight that the hybrids have brought in. They'll be bringing that into the car, but there will be a change in the liter engine they're going to use. They're going to go from 2.2 liter engines now to 2.4 liter V6 engines. A lot of people are not too excited about that, but I think going from a 2.2 to a 2.4 liter is certainly interesting, and I do think the weight reduction on this car will actually make the racing product at least a little bit better. I think IndyCar, like I said, Road America was really good, but generally the IndyCar product this year has not been as good. I think a big problem for that has been the hybrid component. I wish they were taking the hybrid component out, but a big reason why they're keeping the hybrid component is so they can keep Honda in. There's been a lot of rumors Honda may leave IndyCar after 2026. They may be coming over to NASCAR very, very soon. And I do think, in a nutshell, that's one of the big reasons why something like this is happening and taking place. It's disappointing that you can't go and have a little more innovative stuff. There's still going to be a lot of the spec racing, which a lot of people are not a big fan of the spec racing IndyCar currently at the moment. I'm not the biggest fan of it either, believe me, but if they got to keep Honda in, it is what it is at this point. Nonetheless, certainly interesting for sure, and it's good to see at least we're finally going to get a chassis change. 16 years, way too long, but good to see we're finally going to get a new chassis in IndyCar. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Moyer. As it was officially announced and reported by Marshall Pruitt on Saturday morning that Kyle Moyer, who was at Team Penske recently, will officially join Arrow McLaren starting in the upcoming race next week at Mid-Ohio and will become the race engineer for Nolan Siegel, replacing Tony Kanaan, who will move to more duties working with Arrow McLaren going forward. This is a massive, massive pickup for the Arrow McLaren team and organization. Kyle Moyer had been with Team Penske for 10 years, obviously unfortunately got let go because of the whole scandal that took place at the Indy 500. I think this could be a major benefit for Nolan Siegel. Nolan Siegel, we all kind of know, has struggled a little bit in IndyCar, though he did have a solid run this past week at Road America where he showed top 10 and top 15 speed. It's been a struggle for Nolan Siegel to really get adjusted, and having someone who's kind of could be also a really good mentor for him. This is a really, really big deal, and I think this is going to be a massive, massive help for Nolan Siegel going forward. I thought maybe he can go work with Pato or someone like Christian Lundgaard, but I think Moyer's going to nonetheless do a really, really good job as the engineer for the team, and I think that it's going to be fun to see what he can do as the engineer with the program. I think this is a massive and really, really big hiring, and pretty great to see that he'll get the chance and opportunity to work with him going forward. I think it's going to be successful, and I think they're both going to do a really good job working together, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Thomas Anuzietta. As was reported by the NASCAR Rumor Nostalgia account earlier today, that Thomas Anuzietta will be driving the 07 for Spire Motorsports in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series on Saturday afternoon at Lime Rock Park. This is something that I have heard that's potentially going to be happening over the course of the last couple of weeks. I've been hearing rumors about it, and now it seems like it is officially confirmed. Thomas Anuzietta has been a driver who's competed in the Trans Am Series and does have quite a bit of experience at Lime Rock Park. On top of that as well, Lee Honeyman is going to be driving number 70 car for the Cope Racing family team that weekend, so this makes a lot of sense. I think Thomas is a really, really good road course racer. I believe also is going to be running the ARCA race as well, which I think he's got a really good chance to win there. But I think he is a very talented road course racer. And I know the 07 truck has struggled with performance. Pat Germany showed some decent speed at Pocono, but he didn't set the world on fire. And I also do think that Kyle Busch has struggled a little bit in that truck, and Kyle Larson had a difficult time picking up the win, even though he did win at Homestead. The 07 truck has only won one race so far this year. BJ McLeod might drive a race or two in that truck for the end of the year. Who knows at this point? But I think for Thomas is a fantastic opportunity. I think he will make the most out of it for sure, and I think he'll do a pretty solid and a really good job. So excited to see what it can do. We'll see if he can have the pace and speed to contend, but trust me, I don't think he's going to have to worry about it. I think we'll have a pretty good and pretty fast truck this weekend. Looking forward to see what it can do this weekend at Lime Rock Park. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Zilich. Now, we're going to talk about Connor Zilich's crew chief from the NASCAR Xfinity race at Pocono in just a little bit. But the big story from this weekend outside of Chase Briscoe picking up his first win with Joe Gibbs Racing is a driver won the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, and that was Connor Zilich. Connor Zilich was able to pick up his first ever oval win. Technically, it is a triangle, but he was able to pick up his first win on a non-road course track in his NASCAR Xfinity Series career. Connor Zilich is someone who is progressing very, very quickly when it comes to development. The last 4 or 5 races in particular, especially on ovals, I've seen a ton of improvement. He finished second in Charlotte despite missing the race at Texas Motor Speedway where that car went to victory lane, and also finished second at National Super Speedway, had one of the strongest cars in the field. And despite getting into incidents near the end of the race at the road course of Mexico, he was able to finish inside the top 5 even with the damage. And now he's finally picked up his first oval victory. I don't think this is going to be the last time that Connor Zilich is winning races on ovals because that 88 team is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And in my opinion, he has been overall the second fastest full-time driver in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, just behind the guy who's been the fastest guy, Justin Algar. And I think he's starting to even be stronger than Justin Algar currently at the moment. And the more experience that we see Connor Zilich get on these ovals, the better I think he is really going to be. So I have been so impressed to see what he's done and what he's accomplished so far as a young driver in this series. He's getting better. Obviously, there's a lot of talk he may move up to the NASCAR Cup Series next year, which I think he's getting close to earning that right at this particular moment. But he's been doing a really good job, been showing a lot of great pace and speed this year, and I think it's only going to get better. But for Connor, congratulations to him. He continues impressing me on a week-by-week basis. Good to see him get it done, and good to see him get his first ever oval victory, and it won't be the last time, in my opinion, that I think he's going to win oval races in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carson Osar. We've got a couple Carson Osar stories we're going to talk about today on the channel. The first one revolves around what happened during the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Pocono Raceway. So after Cory unfortunately had a flat tire after dominating the majority of this race and probably should have been the guy winning, Carson Osar had to move up on the front row, and Lane Riggs actually had to jump up to the front row because he was in third position at the time. Well, on the ensuing restart, Carson Osar, who was second on the start, he was supposed to originally, I don't think it was originally the control car, and Lane Riggs was a control guy. Now, Lane Riggs did not get the best restart at the time, and Carson actually got ahead of him. Lane wasn't really understanding what Carson Osar was doing on that front and didn't really understand it. Carson Osar would unfortunately get a penalty because of it, because he actually beat Lane Riggs to the start-finish line and got through the starting line first, and Carson was not very happy about it. He basically was complaining about the rules to a lot of people and was complaining on the radio about it as well. Now, at that particular moment and point, like I mentioned, Lane Riggs was a control car. And I do get that there are some things that need to be done in regards to restarts. I do feel like there probably should have been a lap that was added extra so we can get everything sorted out. I think NASCAR, they had a very similar situation last year with Ryan Blaney and Kyle Larson, where Brad Keselowski ran out of gas and came down pit road, and Larson jumped up there. He became the control car at that point, and Ryan Blaney was not very happy about what happened there. But I do think that in this case, this is something that NASCAR needs to be looking at. I thought NASCAR would have definitely been looking at that after what happened at the Brickyard last year, but I guess they didn't decide to make any changes on that front. And I don't really understand why that was an issue this time around, unfortunately, why it took them forever to really figure that out. But I really hope they kind of start looking at something like this, because in my opinion, we shouldn't be having restart controversies like this every time. I know the rules are rules. I get that and understand it, but I seems like there's a lot of those issues a little more consistently right now, and I think it's something they definitely need to work on going forward when it comes to restart controversies like this, because I think something like this probably should have not been a restart controversy, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the in-season tournament. Now, obviously, many of us already noticed, but this weekend is going to be the start of the in-season tournament. It'll be 5 races, which will coincide with TNT's broadcast, which will start this week in Atlanta Motor Speedway. Then the round of 16 will be at Chicago. Then after that, the round of 8 will take place at the next track after that. Then the next, which I believe is going to be Sonoma or Dover, and I believe that then it's Dover, and then it's going to be Indianapolis. And then, of course, the guy who goes to the final will be 2 guys going for $1 million. The person who wins that will get $1 million. And Chase Elliott actually reacted to that, and other people in the industry reacted to it as well. Chase Elliott really has not been paying attention to the in-season tournament, but once he heard $1 million is up for grabs and nothing was going to be affected, Chase Elliott seemed to get a little bit excited about that. Well, Kyle Busch was asked the same question, and Kyle Busch basically said that he's not really going to be paying attention to it at all. I think I've said this once or twice before on this channel, but I do feel like there's not been a lot of promotion for the in-season tournament this year. I mean, until like a couple weeks ago, we heard really nothing about it. And I think the way they seeded a lot of people, I think some of the seeding for this year was really, really confusing. I think the way they should have done the original seeding is the top 32 in the points after Mexico City or after this week at Pocono, because I think that would have been the simplest way they do it, and not just having qualifier races, because I think if you did top 32 in points at the time, you could have seeded accordingly, like first versus 32nd, like second versus 31st, or something like that in the top 32 in the points, especially for a guy like Shane Van Gisbergen, who I think could have played a massive and major factor in some of those races, and probably honestly would have gone all the way to the final round because of how good he's been in Chicago, among other things, and he's a favorite to win that. I am excited for the in-season tournament, and there's going to be a bracket on my channel coming out soon on that. I believe on Tuesday that's going to be coming out, which I think is going to be fun. But I think that there's some things they could have definitely done different with the in-season tournament. There's some excitement, don't get me wrong, but I think there's some skepticism on it because there's a lot of people that are a little bit unknown and uncertain about how the in-season tournament is going to go. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Justin Allgaier and Chase Elliott. Now, we already talked about the fact that Connor Zilich won the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Pocono, but a big reason why that he was able to get that win is because what happened on the second to last racer between Justin Allgaier and Chase Elliott. With around 15 laps to go in this race, going into turn number 1, Justin Allgaier would unfortunately send it way too hard in the corner. It would push up the racetrack and force Chase Elliott up the track. Now, Justin Allgaier lost a ton more positions in ground than Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott would drop from being on the front row all the way back to around 6th or 7th position, while Justin Allgaier would fall unfortunately outside the top 10 and finish around 12th or 13th position. Now, they talked after the race, and Chase Elliott did not seem very angry at Justin Allgaier. He did say that was a really bad move on Justin Allgaier's part, and he said it was very unfortunate what happened to Justin Allgaier there, but it seems like there's no ill will toward both drivers. Justin Allgaier is someone that, yes, will make some kind of questionable mistakes from time to time, but I don't think Justin Allgaier is a dirty driver. I don't think that was intentional from Justin Allgaier, and I do appreciate that Justin Allgaier went up to Chase Elliott after the incident, and they talked about it, because some drivers will not do that when incidents happen, where they're at fault for the mistake, and I think if you're at fault for incident mistake on the track, you need to take accountability and responsibility, and Justin Allgaier did that, and that's why Justin Allgaier is one of the most respected drivers, and why he's one of the favorites already as it is to go out there and win the championship. I mean, there's a big reason why many people were very happy to see Justin Allgaier go win the championship last year, because Justin Allgaier was one of the fastest guys all year, but also is one of the most nicest guys out there and puts together some incredible performances. So for that, I think it was just an unfortunate simple mistake there. It was unintentional. It was unfortunate that it happened the way it happened, and I do think for that, it's a learning mistake for Allgaier that he can learn from, not to overshoot a corner like that. But again, it was unintentional. It was just a little bit of mistake, a little over-aggressive nonetheless, but it was not an intentional mistake from Justin Allgaier, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Amazon Prime. Now, with the conclusion of NASCAR's coverage today at Pocono Raceway, today was the final race for Amazon Prime for everything. Not just the Cup Series race, but also practice qualifying, which has been on Amazon Prime every single week. They will be starting to have their coverage on True TV and HBO Max. If you do have True TV with your TV provider, you won't have to worry about getting HBO Max and paying for it to watch practice and qualifying. I gotta say this about Amazon Prime this year. They did a phenomenal and incredible job with their coverage in 2025. There were very high expectations, a lot of things that they were saying, and I think a lot of people were a little bit skeptical on how good the coverage was going to be. But I think their coverage this year, like I just mentioned a second ago, was absolutely phenomenal. Everyone did an incredible job. There's great chemistry between Adam Alexander, Steve Letarte, and Dale Jr. Yes, Jr. stumbled at times, but they all had great chemistry. They did a phenomenal job with their energy of the broadcast. They kept you up to speed, and he knew what was going on with the coverage. The quality of the broadcasts were absolutely exceptional. They had an hour-long post-race show, and we're still talking about things later. Generally, for a first-year broadcaster, you expect really good things. And I think they absolutely delivered, and they absolutely nailed it. And it's a shame that we have no more Amazon broadcasts going forward. We do have, which I will say, though, I am excited for TNT, though I don't think it's going to be good as Amazon, because there's probably going to be a lot more commercials this time around, though I do think they're going to try to work a way around it to have less commercials, which I think that's going to be really cool, what they do with that. I'm excited for TNT, because a lot of people from the side of Amazon are going to be helping, and NBC as well, are going to be helping with the TNT coverage. You look at Fox, for example, though. Fox's coverage has been really, really bad. You look at their truck broadcasts as well, and I think seeing broadcasts like this, they should be ashamed of themselves on how bad their broadcasts have generally been, and they need to make some major overhauls and major changes over at Fox, because, in my opinion, NASCAR production just needs to take control of the broadcast altogether. But I gotta say, I was really, really impressed with Amazon this year. They nailed it. They delivered everything this year. It's a shame we don't have any more of these going forward, but I think they should be absolutely proud of what they did this year and what they accomplished as a broadcasting group. They did a phenomenal, they did it unbelievable, and I think they did an excellent and really, really fun and fantastic job as a broadcast crew, and I think they did an excellent and good job. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Dale Jr. Now, we already talked about the fact that Connor Zilich picked up his first ever oval win in NASCAR Xfinity Series competition. But the guy who was crew chiefing for Connor Zilich was Dale Jr. This is Dale Jr.'s first win as a crew chief in NASCAR, so he's gone 1-1, where he basically the first time he's ever crew chiefed the car, because Marty Lindley had been suspended for a race because Marty Lindley, there were multiple lug nuts that were coming loose on that car. And basically, he had to set out a race, because if you have more than 2 or 3 lug nuts that are loose on your car, the crew chief in Xfinity is forced to serve a 1-race suspension. And because of that, Dale Jr. got a really awesome opportunity for the first time to be a crew chief. I believe he's only the 9th driver, according to Seth Egger. He is only the 9th driver in the top divisions to go ahead and accomplish something like this in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and NASCAR's top divisions as well. I believe Lee Petty's done that. I believe Wendell Scott. I believe a couple of drivers in the truck series like Bob Kozlowski have been able to accomplish something like this. Dale Jr. was also asked a question after that race had concluded: would you be interested in doing it once again? He said, if there's an opportunity down the road and I can become an interim crew chief once again, I would absolutely love to do it. Dale Jr., there's obviously going to be people that help Dale Jr. on this. He's got people over at the War Room of Junior Motorsports, and Hendrick's probably helping a little bit as well. I do think that they were helping a little bit with Dale Jr. get this win, but Dale Jr. also played a major important role and major factor in really helping this car go to victory lane. Dale Jr. probably helped set up the car a little bit, and he coached Connor on what to do on these restarts, and I think Dale Jr. being there really played a major role in helping Connor Zilich go to victory lane. So for Dale Jr., this is a phenomenal accomplishment to go out there and now not only be a driver who's one as an owner, one as a driver, but now one as a crew chief as well. At this point, the only thing Dale Jr. needs to do is go out there and win as a spotter. I think that'd be pretty incredible if that ended up happening. Nonetheless, congratulations, Dale Jr. on winning now. A big deal for him, and good to see him go out there and pick up the win and pick up a really strong victory in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Pocono as a crew chief. Pretty impressive stuff, and good to see him get it done. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Denny Hamlin. Now, of course, Denny Hamlin missed the NASCAR Cup Series race at Mexico City, and Ryan Truex substituted. The big reason why Denny Hamlin missed was actually a really good reason. It was because of the birth of his son, Jamison Hamlin, who was born on Wednesday evening. And Denny Hamlin was asked questions about, would have you been able to go to Mexico City if things worked out a little bit better? Well, Denny Hamlin says he would have gone to Mexico if his son was born by Thursday, and unfortunately, he said Jordan had a difficult time in labor, unfortunately, and he needed to be with his wife, or fiance, a little bit longer to make sure to take care of the baby. Honestly, I think we all know racing is really important in Denny Hamlin's life, and I think racing is important in the Hamlin's life altogether. But family needs to become the most important thing. And I think Denny Hamlin made the right decision to go ahead and stay out at least a week, especially with the unknowns of travel. If Denny Hamlin got stuck and something had happened that was really, really bad, I think then Denny Hamlin would have been making a terrible decision to go to Mexico. So as much as I think it is important for Denny Hamlin to be at these events and be at every race he can, I think Denny Hamlin absolutely made the right decision to go ahead and miss out on racing in Mexico City so he could be with his family. I think, again, family has to be the most important thing at this point for Denny Hamlin. Taking care of his kids, taking care of his family, that needs to be the number one priority for Denny Hamlin at the moment. Plus, Denny Hamlin's already won 3 races this year. Could have won a 4th today, had a really fast car. And Denny Hamlin's one of the favorites already to win the championship. The good news for Denny Hamlin fans, he's got a playoff waiver, so we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to worry about waivers or anything like that and worry if he's going to get a waiver or not. So for Denny Hamlin, he made the most important decision and the right decision, in my opinion. And I think the main focus for Hamlin now is to focus and get away from that and now focus on trying to go out there and win as many races as possible and collect as many playoff points in the NASCAR Cup Series and try to win the championship. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Elliott. Now, after the NASCAR Cup Series race had concluded at Pocono Raceway, he was asked a lot about the racing quality that we saw at Pocono Raceway. And Chase Elliott basically warned a lot of people who were interviewing him, including people from Front Stretch, by basically saying they were going to be hearing a lot more about dirty air going forward in the future, and there'll be more races that are affected with dirty air. Obviously, with Pocono Raceway, this is something I kind of mentioned in my race review. A lot of times, at a track like Pocono, dirty air is going to be a factor. There's always been dirty air at this racetrack, whether it's the Gen 4 car, the car of tomorrow, or whether it's the Gen 6 car. There's been always dirty air that's been affecting a lot of the races at the track. But what I've noticed, especially with the next-gen car, is you can see this is not just a Pocono issue. Even at short tracks this year, we've seen those be affected by dirty air and guys not being able to get by, like at Bristol, for example, or like Martinsville, for example. It was very difficult to pass in Martinsville, or even sometimes the road courses for that matter, or the super speedways, where dirty air plays a role, and if you get out of line, you're going to be gridlocked. There's not a lot of tracks where this car is absolutely amazing. You can't stay behind somebody for so long, otherwise your car is likely going to shut off, and you're not going to have the pace and speed. This next-gen car almost got rushed, by the way, at one point. But I do think that this car does have some benefits in some way, shapes, or forms. But I also do think that this car really needs work. I mean, the fact that guys like Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney, and Chase Elliott, who were faster than Chase Briscoe in the race, could not get by him, that was really, really concerning. And I do think that there absolutely needs to be work that is done on the next-gen car, because I think the racing product right now can be a lot better at a lot of these tracks. I think generally until today, Pocono has actually put on some decent shows with the next-gen car, so it was really surprising to see the racing product and the racing quality not be as strong as we've seen in recent years. And it was disappointing in a sense, too, because I think a lot of people had really high expectations and were let down a little bit that the racing today was not that good. And I completely understand. I think we're going to see a lot more going forward. I think there needs to be major changes done to the next-gen car to get the quality of the racing better going forward. I really hope it happens that we get better racing going forward, because the sooner we can have a lot good racing, the better I think it's going to be for everybody. So we'll see if we can get better quality racing in the future. NASCAR can kind of work on that. Adding horsepower, I think, would be the right start, and making changes, not as many changes to aero, but working on that kind of stuff will be the best way to start, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch and Dale Jr. Now, there were some interesting comments that surfaced earlier this weekend, of course, about Dale Jr. being a crew chief in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And unfortunately, I think Front Stretch took a little bit of what Kyle Busch said a little bit out of context with the headline that they have put out. Basically, Kyle Busch said, in a sense, that Dale Jr. is a warm body, but he also emphasized that a lot of people in the war room with how the crew chiefs are suspended, he basically said a lot of people in the war room are helping Dale Jr. guide him and help him in a really, really big way. And he also responded to that as well by basically saying that they're not listening to the full entire clip. He basically was talking about how when crew chiefs do get suspended, they're not really suspended, and there's a war room at these teams. He said this, it would be the same thing if like Jeff Gordon was a crew chief, for example, one of the Hendrick Motorsports cars, or like the 17 car in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. So I think that that's something very important to know. And Kyle Busch is not entirely wrong when it comes to the crew chief side of things. When a crew chief gets suspended in NASCARs, you basically miss a race, but you can still be around like the shops. You can basically show up at like the Junior Motorsports shop and be in the war room. They keep a lot of people at these teams at the shops, including some of the engineers basically at like the Junior Motorsports shop, for example, like the Joe Gibbs Racing shop, for example, and keep them there to try to help with data and guide them through the races every single week. And I do think, in a nutshell, I think there's something that can be done about that. I think if a crew chief is suspended, they probably shouldn't be allowed to go to the war room and be allowed to help really call it. They're being suspended for a reason. Now, I get the reason why he unfortunately got suspended, that being Marty Lindley, was because of the lug nut situation. That's not something really Marty Lindley controls, unfortunately. I think maybe they can make a new rule on the lug nuts where if you have like 5 or 6 lug nuts that are gone, then maybe you get suspended. I think only having 2 or 3 lug nuts across the whole entire car is probably not the best way to basically give out a suspension on that front. But I do think if you do get suspended, you should basically have to go and miss and not be in the war room altogether. I do agree with Kyle Busch on that. I do think there are some changes that absolutely could be made in some of these areas. I think they can be made, and I really hope we do see some changes made very, very soon in some of this kind of stuff in the not-so-distant future. We'll see what happens going forward, and we'll see if maybe there are some changes made with some complaints about it from some people, but I do think that maybe there could be some changes made with the crew chiefing stuff in the not-so-distant future, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Cam Waters. Now, we obviously know Cam Waters is actually making a return to NASCAR competition this weekend in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series at Lion Rock Park, as he's going to drive the number 66 truck for Thor Sport Racing, with Rich Lucius being the crew chief this weekend. Now, Shane Van Gisbergen actually spoke to the media about this, and he says and confirmed that Cam Waters was actually working on a deal to race in the NASCAR Cup Series race at the Chicago Street Course, but he did confirm, as expected, that Cam Waters, that deal has unfortunately fallen through, and he will not run the NASCAR Cup Series race at the Chicago Street Course. Now, what team was Cam Waters supposed to run for this year? Well, the organization and team that he was supposed to race for was supposed to be the organization known as RFK Racing. RFK was either going to put him in a 4th car for the organization, like the 26 or 29 or something like that, or they were going to go ahead and put him in a Rick Ware Racing car, most likely number 15 car. It is unknown exactly what the full details are on that. My theory is that there was some sponsorship stuff that fell through. I know Cam Waters has some really close ties with Monster Energy, I'm pretty sure. I believe Build Submarine Units, or USA, is working very closely with Cam Waters as well. They sponsored him when he ran the NASCAR Cup Series race at Sonoma. But Shane Van Gisbergen also emphasized that he is very excited to see that Cam is competing in trucks and thinks that Cam has a really good chance to win. And I do agree. I think especially with the fact that Cam Waters is going to be going to a track where a lot of drivers in the series are not going to have really much of an advantage at all, because most of the drivers in trucks have never ran here. I believe Brent Cruz is running the truck race, who might be my pick to win the Truck Series race, by the way. I think he's ran here quite a bit. And I believe Thomas Anuzietta has also ran at that track as well. And I believe Cory Day's also run the truck race, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not entirely sure. But I think for Cam Waters, it is going to be fun to see him in the Truck Series. It's a shame, because I know Cam Waters wants to race in the Cup Series once again. He's expressed interest about it, and I know there was a lot of excitement that he was going to run that race at Chicago, but I think some of the charter lawsuit stuff probably played a little bit of factor in that, unfortunately, and I think there's some other things that might have played a factor in that as well. So we'll see what happens going forward, and we'll see if maybe we'll see Cam Waters run a Cup Series race in the future. I know they're working on that behind the scenes to get more starts for Cam Waters in NASCAR competition, but you have so little off time right now because, of course, Supercars is making their way through the season currently at the moment, and with the Super Adelaide event going on a couple of months from now, which Kyle Larson was supposed to run, but Larson unfortunately is not running that this year. We'll see what happens, but for Cam Waters, it's unfortunate to see he will not run the NASCAR Cup Series race at Chicago, and will focus on some more stuff and focus on trying to win the Truck Series race, which I think will have a really good chance and a very strong opportunity to win that. I think we'll have good pace and speed to get that done, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Philadelphia once again. Now, earlier this week on Friday, there were some reports that came out earlier in the week, I believe it was on Wednesday, from a business journal from the Philadelphia area, insinuating that Steve O'Donnell has told the media that there is a potential chance that NASCAR is looking at racing in Philadelphia in the future. Now, Governor Josh DePerry, who of course is the governor of Pennsylvania, he was asked the same question about this, and he confirmed that if the race is put in Philadelphia and there is a NASCAR Cup Series race that takes place during that time, it will not affect the NASCAR Cup Series race at Pocono. Yes, Pocono and Philadelphia are a little bit close together, but they're not exactly the same. I mean, Pennsylvania is actually a much bigger state than I do think a lot of people realizes. Now, when a lot of people hear Philadelphia, they ask, oh, is this going to be another street course race? You're already going to have the San Diego race, and there's maybe a chance that Chicago's going to come back, even though I've heard that Chicago probably is not coming back next year. We're probably going to be going to Chicagoland. Well, that's not exactly what is going to happen. If Philadelphia is the host in NASCAR Cup Series Day, it will not be a street race more than likely. What I think it's going to be is Frankfurt Stadium or Frankfurt Field or Franklin Field or something like that. There's a stadium that is kind of like the LA Coliseum thing that they did for the Busch Clash. And I think those events were very successful. The last year wasn't as successful. That was unfortunate because everything got moved up a day due to the biblical storm of the century in the Los Angeles area. And NASCAR, I think, really liked the stadium concept, and they want to do it once again. Now, obviously, I don't think that's going to be happening for 2026, but I think that's something for the future, like 2027 or 2028. And I think it'd be really awesome if NASCAR went to Philadelphia. It is not a fully tapped market. Yes, Pocono is kind of in that market, but it's not 1,000% a fully tapped market. There's been rumors about NASCAR maybe down the road trying to get a street race in the Pittsburgh area, perhaps. They've talked about that, and I think it'd be really cool if they could race in the Pittsburgh area. But obviously, right now, they're looking to go to San Diego next year, and I think that announcement, according to what Jordan Bianchi said earlier in the evening, it sounds like that announcement is going to be coming sometime in the middle of July, so probably about 3 to 4 weeks, we should be getting an official announcement that San Diego is going to be coming back on the schedule. But I really like the idea of kind of expanding and doing things like this. And the good news is, too, is on the Pocono side of things, is they don't want to affect Pocono. And I think that is very, very important because if you get rid of Pocono, that's going to be bad because Pocono has been really successful for attendance. Sure, the racing product can be a little bit better at the track, but you need to have that track on the schedule so people can go to it because I think Pocono is a pretty big market and a lot of people go there. I mean, I think they've increased the amount of seats that have been added to the track in recent years, and I think that Pocono is a hot tourist spot for a lot of people that are going there currently at this moment. So pretty cool to see that they're talking about it, and it's also good that Philadelphia, if they add a race in the city, it won't affect Pocono. It could, but as of right now, it doesn't sound like that, and I think Josh Shapiro is going to do what he can to try to make sure to not get the date gone from the Pocono track because of how much money it does bring to the table. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Carson Osar. Now, we already talked about the restart controversy that took place during the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Pocono Raceway. But Carson Osar also spoke about a couple other things that took place earlier this week. So, obviously, we know that he is currently in a little bit of beef with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. During the NASCAR Cup Series race at National Super Speedway, Carson Osar was right behind Ricky Stenhouse Jr. about 20th to 25th at that point. About lap 10 of stage number 2, Carson and Senos were battling quite hard, and Senos would come down the racetrack a little bit, but Carson would try to force it up into the inside of Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and would end up spinning Ricky Stenhouse Jr. into the outside wall, and Ricky's night would come to an end, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was absolutely furious, and Senos was not very happy going to the media, but they had a talk and conversation after the week of National, and we thought the story was going to be coming to a close after Michigan. Well, the story has once again heated up once again, because during the race, Carson Osar, who by the way was a lap down at this point of the event, Carson turned Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and this is now 2 of the last 4 or 5 races where Stenhouse has been unfortunately affected by Obar's actions, and Stenhouse has gone from being someone who could have made the playoffs on points this year to now not having a chance and opportunity maybe to get there unless he picks up a win and victory, and probably should not be there at this point. So for Carson, he's got to clean this up. And Obar did say that he knows that payback is coming from Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and he knows as fair as Stenhouse does get to him, considering it is 2-0 at this point. At least Carson Osar does have the self-awareness that if he does get turned by Ricky Stenhouse Jr., it's intentional. It is justified, because I do think that the over-aggressiveness from Obar, well, it can be a little bit of advantage for him. It has also caused a lot of incidents and a lot of mistakes from him. And I think that's a little unfortunate that for Obar, who I think is very, very talented, it's kind of overshadowed things, because when you look at the speed that 77 team has had this year, they have been generally really fast and really, really impressive. But the over-aggressiveness that Carson has had at times, I think is unfortunately affected him. Sure, it's made some positive moves for the team. I'm not going to deny that, but there's also been some negativity with that because it's caused a lot of incidents on the racetrack for Carson Osar. And finally, some of the Mexico City comments. Unfortunately, Carson Osar, of course, got a $50,000 fine. It sounds like that NASCAR was going to take action against Carson, according to what Jordan Bianchi said earlier tonight on the teardown. If Spire did not do anything, they fined Carson $50,000. Carson, of course, did accept it. He apologized multiple times about the incident. And Carson did say that I said what I said before getting out to the racetrack, and I do need to do better and not say things out of my mouth before I do get in a lot of trouble. At least Carson's also recognizing that too. I think Carson is very talented. I've been very high on him. But there's some times where you question some of the things that Carson Osar does, and you get a little frustrated about it because you know this guy is really talented and really good. But he also makes some really questionable and really, really bad judgment calls as a race car driver out there. And sometimes some of the comments that he says I think are really, really questionable. So I think for Carson, he needs to clean some of this up going forward. I think he's very, very talented. He's really, really good. But some of the things he says as a young driver, you can't say some of the things like calling Mexico City a shithole before you get out to the racetrack. And you can't say some of the things that he said. And I think that it was justified that he got a penalty from Spire Motorsports, $50,000 fine. Also got to do sensitivity training, which I think he'll be able to accomplish that with no issues and no problems, because I think he's someone who is a good person, but he also just made a really bad mistake. But he's 22, and he definitely needs to start doing better because you're a little bit older at that point. And now we're going to head on to the next story in today's episode as we're talking about Bowman Gray Stadium. As was reported by multiple outlets from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, that Winston-Salem is close to a deal that would bring at least one national level NASCAR race for a period of 5 years at Bowman Gray Stadium. On top of that as well, if this deal is to go through, it sounds like there would be some renovations that would take place at the track, including renovating the scoreboard, among other things like the ticker, among other things that are at the racetrack. We have obviously heard a lot of rumors and rumblings that Bowman Gray Stadium more than likely will return in 2026 for the Busch Light Clash, or the Cookout Clash, after the first year was very successful. There was a lot of talk also that NASCAR was looking to go to Brazil, maybe at Interlagos, to have a potential road course race to open up the season at that racetrack. But because of logistical issues and NASCAR still not having things done with Brazil currently at the moment, and as NASCAR continues to try to expand internationally with their portfolio, they obviously are looking to return to Bowman Gray Stadium. And I think there's a couple reasons. Number one, I think the ratings for the event were actually really, really good. But number two, they had a very successful time there. I think that it was one of the best short track races we have not only seen in the last couple of years, but one of the best races we have seen with the next gen car. I think the racing product was really good, and I think it was a very, very popular event. Yes, there still needs to be more people going to these races as you compare to an event like Daytona, for example, where they have hundreds of thousands of seats that are available at the racetrack and a lot of opportunities with camping as well. You don't have that as much with Bowman Gray, who only has about 10 or 15,000 seats. But optically, it looks a lot better than a race like Daytona, where you're not going to fill as many people out there. Plus, you're going to have a better racing product, in my opinion, at a track like Bowman Gray right now than you are going to have at Daytona with a lot of the gridlock that's going on currently at the moment with the next-gen car. But what's interesting is past the first year, because it sounds like it's not just a 1-year deal, it's going to be a 5-year deal, and there's like a 5 to 10-year plan. What this tells me is that they're looking to bring multiple national series to the track going forward. Would mean not just the NASCAR Cup Series or the Xfinity Series, and what the sponsor is going to be for the secondary series, because we all remember that Xfinity will not be the title sponsor for the secondary series after this year. Maybe Busch, for example, will come in, and then the Craftsman Truck Series might come in and race there as well. Could this be a potential possible landing spot for an all-star race, perhaps? Because I think there's been talk that maybe Bowman Gray could move to more of an all-star day in the not-so-distant future, and then you can bring like the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series out there. The one thing you have to look at, though, is the field sizes. If you do have to happen a points race at the track, you're going to have elimination-style format to get the number of cars out there, because there's no way you're going to be able to fit 40 cars on that racetrack. I think you probably can get 30 at the most, but you're probably not going to be able to get 40 cars out there on the racetrack at once, on the Cup side, the Xfinity Series side, or the Truck Series side, if you are to do that. But the most important thing right here is the fact that it sounds like Bowman Gray could potentially be back on the schedule for the long term, not just for 2026, not just for 2027, but also going forward to like 2030 or 2031. And that's really exciting, because Bowman Gray is a historic track. Yes, it's known as the Madhouse. It caused a lot of chaos. It caused a lot of controversy from time to time, but there's a big reason why the track has been so successful in the weekly series side of things for many years, is because of the chaos that it does bring to the table. And there wasn't as much of that that chaos during the NASCAR Cup race, for example, as it was like during the modified race, which the modified race also gave us an opportunity to see people like Tim Brown, who won a lot of races at Bowman Gray, and Burt Myers, one of the legends of that track, get a chance and opportunity to make a start in the Cup Series, and then also get the opportunity to race at Martinsville as well, where things didn't go super well for Burt Myers, but he got a really great and phenomenal opportunity there. Of course, with Tim Brown being working at Rick Ware, he got a great opportunity to drive there as well. But what makes me so excited about Bowman Gray, it's a track that has a lot of history. It's a track that does have some class in some way, shape, or form, and I think it's pretty exciting, and I think it's pretty phenomenal that it sounds like it could be coming back next year. I think on the schedule for the Clash, but also could have a points-paying race down in the not-so-distant future. I think that's exciting, and I think that's pretty cool to see that it might most likely happen here very, very soon, in my honest opinion. I think that's really exciting and really great. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. Now, I did a video covering this story on the channel on Friday, but as expected, 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports have not just asked the 3 judges that made the original decision on overturning the preliminary injunction, but they are now asking all 15 judges, part of the 4th Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond County in Virginia. They have asked all of them for the full appeals panel to hear the full case. Now, what is this case around? Well, this, of course, is part of the lawsuit between 2311 Front Row Motorsports and NASCAR. What they are wanting is a preliminary injunction so they can compete as charter teams for the whole entire season before the lawsuit is officially done. What was said in there is there was wording that they looked at, and they did not look at the full entire wording. Now, because of this, there will be a delay in this. Because of the fact that they made the decision to go and appeal, this means that going past Atlanta and most likely the Chicago Street Courts, if the judges do decide to go ahead and hear this whole entire preliminary injunction hearing, they would be going past the Chicago Street Courts, and they'd be able to keep their charters through that entire point. And the big thing they look at is release of claims. That's the big thing that they were emphasizing on. Release of claims is pretty much basically saying you can't sue us, quintessentially, and then basically compete as a charter team, which the judges basically said you might have a strong case over on everything, but they basically said you can't have the cake and eat it too. Now, with this, there is a hold that's been placed, and the judges that are part of the Circuit Court of Appeals will make a decision here very, very soon. And a decision is going to have to be made very, very quickly on what they are going to do. Shall they go ahead and go to the appeal and hear everything? That decision could come a week or so after that. And all 15 judges will organize together to make an official decision. What this is an appeal on the preliminary injunction. Because you can't pay back Stewart Haas Racing, who no longer exists in NASCAR Cup competition anymore, and they don't exist as a team. But the reason they're asking for these charters to stick around is because of the driver contracts. Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick, Cory are all required to have charters if they go cup racing. Same with Riley Herbst as well, who got the Stewart Haas Racing charter with the organization. But also you have to look at the other side as well with Front Row. Zane Smith, Todd Gillen, and Noah Gragson, I believe also from the Front Row side of things, they're required to have charters in their contracts. In fact, most drivers that do sign now with full-time teams, they are required to have charters in their contracts to compete as a full-time car. That's why you don't see as many of the non-charter teams showing up anymore, because a lot of these teams that are new, they need to have charters in there. What this could mean is that they do lose their charters altogether, and this doesn't go, and they do have this happen. What this would entirely mean is that everyone could be a potential free agent that's affected by this. Bubba Wallace could potentially be a free agent. Tyler Reddick almost was a free agent, and I think he would have probably gone to Joe Gibbs Racing at this point if he unfortunately did not have a signed contract situation there. But I believe that Riley Herbst would have been affected, and also Todd Gillen, Noah Gragson, and Zane Smith would also be affected. I think the interesting thing with the rest of this is if this does, and they're able to get their preliminary injunction re-granted once again, then I think that there'll be a really strong case here for them to win the whole entire lawsuit. But keep in mind, just because what happens with the preliminary injunction does not entirely mean that the lawsuit is officially lost or officially won by both teams in NASCAR as well. I think that when you look at this overall lawsuit, I think the interesting thing that's going to be there is when we get to the discovery process. I think the discovery phase is the most interesting part of this lawsuit right now, because when we get there and we start hearing some of the stuff ends up getting leaked, which I think a lot of that is going to get leaked very, very soon, I think that's going to be the interesting part. But also, we should be getting a decision not so distant future on what's going to happen if the other charter teams, if they're going to be forced to come into the lawsuit altogether, whether teams like RFK, perhaps, with guys like Ryan Preece, Brad Keselowski, Chris Buescher, Hyak Motorsports, and people like Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, William Byron, Alex Bowman, Trackhouse of Shane Van Gisbergen, and Ross Chastain, Daniel Suarez, and maybe Connor Zilich next year, and other people could end up getting involved with the lawsuit long term, and that those teams get involved. The teams that sign the charter agreement, they don't really want to be part of the lawsuit at this point, and they don't really want to join. But if they get forced to by the judge, they may not have a choice. I mean, they've already been told to overturn some of the money that they're making at the teams to really help NASCAR in this lawsuit at this point. So I think for 2011 and front row, there is a chance they could lose their charters over altogether. If they do go ahead and win this appeal, they will be able to keep their charters. But as of right now, I think there's some skepticism around that at this point, and we'll just have to continue following the story as time progresses and goes on. But again, there is a chance and possibility of Michael Jordan being involved. There's a chance and possibility the 2011 and front row could maybe, just maybe, have the opportunity to keep their charters, but there's also a chance they may end up losing their charters altogether. We'll just have to wait and see what happens with the remainder of the lawsuit. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Tab Boyd. As it was officially confirmed on Friday morning that Tab Boyd, as confirmed by Ricky Senos Jr. in a Sirius XM NASCAR radio interview, he confirmed that Tab Boyd has sadly been fired from Hyak Motorsports, and Clayton Hughes will be the new spotter going forward for the remainder of the season. This has been rumored over the course of the last couple days after Tab Boyd basically was not listed as a spotter, and after some comments have surfaced during the NASCAR Cup Series weekend at Mexico City. We already talked about the Carson Osar got handed a $50,000 fine last week from Spire Motorsports on Tuesday evening for comments he made during a live stream. Well, Tab Boyd got fired, maybe potentially over comments he made on social media. Basically, what he said is that he basically got hustled and scammed in the city of Mexico. And then he basically went on a little bit of rant by saying, screw this place, and I don't ever want to come back here. Well, people on Stacking Pennies podcast like Cory LaJoie said that maybe Tab Boyd was not entirely telling the truth about exactly what happened, and that Tab was basically told by people in NASCAR to not go and do some of the things like go out on the street and basically get hustled and basically get scammed. If that happened, then unfortunate for Tab Boyd. Now, that being said, it's not the most street smart thing we have seen Tab Boyd done, which isn't shocking and surprising. Well, obviously, let's talk about the situation. I think there's really two sides you can look at this. Number one, Tab Boyd does have responsibility as a person who works for a team and organization. And keep this in mind for Tab Boyd. Tab Boyd is still working at other organizations. He was a spotter for Luke Baldwin in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race, and also was a spotter for Ryan Ellis at DGM Racing. Now, I do think there needs to be some important context here. If the tweet is a big reason why he was fired from Hyak Motorsports, I do not agree with that. I think that's going a little bit overboard, and that's crossing the line, and I think we are setting a very dangerous precedent if that is a major reason why Tab Boyd was fired. I don't think someone should be fired over a tweet. Now, that being said, he probably shouldn't go on social media and tweet everything that's happening in the industry. Sometimes that kind of stuff either needs to be put into a group chat, for example, or to basically talked about not on the public eye, because people are paying attention and they're watching very, very closely. And unlike Carson Osar, who did have a sponsor from Mexico with Total Play, I don't believe Ricky Senos Jr. and that team had a sponsor that was from Mexico. So I don't agree with that entirely with him getting fired for that. However, I do have a little bit of a theory that it wasn't just that. I think they were looking for any excuse, very similar situation with Noah Gragson. I think that they were looking for maybe some way to get out. I wonder if there was not some of the good chemistry going on between Ricky Senos Jr. and Tab Boyd. I mean, Tab Boyd got moved over there a couple years ago, I think in 2023, and Brendan Lyons got moved over to work with William Byron. Tab and William Byron had really good chemistry together from what I remember, and it seemed like maybe that was going away. I mean, he's jumped from team to team, it seems like, every couple years at this point. So I have to think maybe there's some stuff to happen. Maybe it's told by the team, you need to apologize for what happened in your comments, he said. And Tab Boyd maybe said, I don't want to do that at this particular moment. And that's probably one of the reasons he got fired. I don't know. But if it was just from the tweet, I don't agree with that. And I think that Hyak is jumping the gun a little bit, and that's not the best way. It makes people that went to Mexico City, who I know, who had a lot of fun out there in Mexico City, it makes it look like it was a little bit forced, unfortunately. But then the other side of things, you look at this as well, and I will say this, you do represent the team you drive for or you work for. And spotters are a little bit easier replaceable than a driver is, for example. With Tab Boy, I think that the most important lesson here is, one, you need to be a little more responsible with what you tweet. And basically, if you're going to say you got scammed in a city, for example, you might want to provide at least the proof that something like that happened. Because from what people are saying that might have been there might not be entirely truth of what Tab Boy said. Of course, Suzanne Boyd, who is Tab Boyd's wife, she basically was defending Tab Boy quite a bit, and she went on a little bit of a crash out, unfortunately, on social media. But I really hope that this isn't a dangerous precedent if he did get fired for that tweet. I really hope it's not a dangerous precedent where we are firing individuals for what they tweet on social media. I think that is a major, major issue. I get that people wanted to make this event very, very important. I think the Mexico event was actually a major, major important event. And I think in general, when you look at the success of the Mexico race itself, one, the Cup race is really good. And I think the weekend itself was a major, major success. The problem is that I don't want to see things forced, and I don't want it to seem like it felt forced, which a lot of people, like I said, that were there had a lot of fun and had a lot of fun being there. But the problem is that for some people, it probably felt like it was forced to have fun in the event. If you didn't love the event altogether, you probably are going to get in trouble. But that being said, I think that everyone has a responsibility. You have a platform. You have responsibility for the team. You represent the sponsors, and you represent everybody involved with your team. Very similar to the Carson Osar situation. You have to be very, very careful when you sign up with these teams, and I would not be surprised or shocked if Hyak did have some sort of social media clause in their contracts when he signed with them. You have to be very careful what you tweet, and you have to be very careful what you put out there on social media. But again, we don't know the full context of the story, and we're probably never going to hear the full context story unless like Dortmund Berclair says something this week or other people kind of talk about it. I don't think that they brought it up on the teardown earlier tonight, which I think is interesting. They kind of skipped over that, but I do think it's interesting that Tab Boy was fired. Unfortunate there, Tab is still involved in the sport and has not been fired from the sport altogether, by the way, so he still is free to work in the sport, and maybe some team will pick him up and hire him in Cup. We'll just have to wait and see on that front. So, that is going to today's Long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. List description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. You think the Hyak made the right decision? You think they went a little overboard? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about 2011 and Front Row appealing the overturn of the preliminary injunction? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If any major news breaks later today, we'll discuss it live on the channel. Tomorrow on the channel, we are going to be doing the bracket reaction predictions for the in-season tournament. I'll be going through all 32 drivers competing in the in-season tournament and going by each of the pairings, and we'll continue breaking that throughout the day. And then, of course, on Tuesday as well, we'll have Truck Series race picks for Lime Rock as well. Then on Wednesday, we are going to have a NASCAR news. We discussed the news over the course of the last couple of days, and we're also going to have the Xfinity race picks for Atlanta, and then Thursday we'll have Cup race 6 for Atlanta along with paint scheme video, and then Friday a NASCAR news video along with the I think we're going to have the Cup qualifying, I think, is on Friday as well, so we'll have reactions to that, and then of course we'll have the Xfinity review. We got content coming out, people like Haley Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Cards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Amazon, KSI, Logan Paul, Cletus McFarland, Frankie Muniz, Dodge, Ram, all the good stuff. Tony Breidinger, Sam Mayer, Sheldon Creed, Connor Zilich, Junior Motorsports, all that will be talked about on the channel in the coming days and weeks. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.